Half of young men haven't approached a woman in over a year, and this might be reshaping the dating world as we know it. Here's the thing. Men today are approaching women less than ever before, and it's not just about rejection. Studies are actually showing social changes, generational psychology, and even cultural fear is playing a role. So in this video, we're just going to cover 3 big questions. Why are men approaching less? Do women actually want to be approached? And is it really riskier now than in the past? So let's get into it. Men just aren't in the same social spaces as they used to be. There is an overall decline in socializing, typically. Over the last decade, young people are spending dramatically less time together in person. The WHO did a study covering teenagers in 37 countries, and they basically saw a huge decline in house parties, group hangouts, casual meetups between 2012 and 2022. And the trend directly shrinks opportunities for organic conversations and potential approaches, right? A psychologist by the name of Dr. Jean Tweng, she did a huge study which basically confirmed this, that young adults basically have smaller friendship circles, there's less peer interaction, and there's more time being spent online on these devices. Even basic things like going to the shopping center or hanging out at a friend's house just doesn't happen as much as it used to. So with less chances to meet up face to face, men aren't just choosing not to approach, they're simply encountering less real world situations where an approach could even happen. Now, across the board, Gen Z engages in less riskier behavior. Them little youths there. There was a survey that was done that also showed a decline in smoking, drinking, drug use, fighting, and even teenage sex. Psychologists kind of say that this is pointing to a shift towards more caution in society and more safety. And some people will say this, and this is often considered to be a decline in risky behavior in youth, which is understandable because I know when I was younger, there was a lot of people my age doing madness. So dating and approaching someone in public, in some ways, nowadays is considered to be risky. Obviously, you risk being rejected, you risk the embarrassment, you risk the awkwardness. And for a generation that's kind of growing up, being less cautious, it makes sense that they approach less because there is a fear of rejection. Now, every man across every generation has felt that little lump in his throat before talking to a girl that he finds attractive. The difference now is the rejection is different. When I was younger, approaching a girl didn't mean that I was going to get exposed on IG or WhatsApp or a TikTok video. It just meant that she said no, and I just tuck my tail between my legs and walk away and have a cry about it somewhere else. Nowadays, obviously, most dating is done on this device. So if you get rejected, she could probably screenshot it. You got girls that are making whole videos about you. It could get real awkward very quick. So there's a understandable reason why men decide to not do it. And some anecdotal data and smaller surveys also suggest that guys worry that rejection isn't going to be private. Getting ignored or rejected at a bar or club is basically going to go viral on TikTok or Instagram these days. Now, this fear hasn't been backed by any studies, but it's more of a social conversation that I personally see. And it's not just the no that hurts guys' feelings, it's the fear of being humiliated in a world that basically shares everything online. So no guy wants to be seen as creepy or thirsty or desperate. And according to another set of research, 53% of single men say the fear of being seen as creepy keeps them from approaching women. This isn't about rejection entirely. It's more about how if you become socially marked, it can be damaging. And all you got to do is go on Reddit. Like Reddit is like a rabbit hole, and it will show you how a lot of men feel paralyzed by the idea that one wrong move can ruin their reputation. And actual research and surveys kind of support what a lot of these men are feeling, even though a lot of the men on these Reddit polls and these forums are talking from anecdotal data, but there are a lot of them, like thousands of men kind of congregating in these areas saying similar kind of things. So it's opinion driven, but there is some research to back it. Now, some of this fear is exaggerated in my opinion, but I still think it influences behavior. And if you go on TikTok, it's kind of all you see. Like, it gets the most views when you talk about gender wars and dynamics and men being lonely, weak, whatever it may be. And if men actually believe that approaching women makes them creepy or desperate, then men will avoid it altogether. Even though some women, most women actually say, as long as it's respectful, they don't mind being approached. So if we look at the dating apps like Tinder and Bumble, and if we look at the social apps like IG and TikTok, they've basically become the new place for flirting and meeting people, right? For many men, typing a message feels safer than walking up to a woman in person. You type a message, if they don't respond, they don't respond. In real life, you see someone, they say no, it's embarrassing. There's no large-scale gold standard data proving that online dating has replaced approaching entirely. But, surveys do show that men are more likely to initiate online than face-to-face. And this is kind of a shift. And it's a correlation rather than a causation, but it's still a shift, right? In the way that we see dating in this day and age compared to when I was a teenager and obviously now. So the convenience of these apps basically reduce the risk, and it offers a sort of filtering system. A woman can look at the app and is he the right height? Does he have a beard? Is he chiseled? Is he fat? A guy can look through at pictures and say, is she fat? Is she in shape? Does she go to the gym? Does she have the kind of hair that he likes? We can now filter through these apps and then make decisions based on that. And that's kind of what people are doing now, right? So, but to me, there's a downside to that, and it conditions men to avoid real world approaches where the stakes are a bit higher, but the connection can be deeper, because it kind of goes without saying, but if you are with someone in person, you create a deeper connection than just talking online. Now, do women actually want to be approached? I think that's the interesting question, because most women say they do want to be approached. Because I thought, let me actually see if there's any research on this. And there is a survey, which I will link in the comments, and most women said they do actually want to be approached by men, which kind of goes against what I even hear when I talk to people. Now, there is a survey on a website called DatePsych, and this data is not fully verified. I was trying to find where his sources were, and he didn't cite anything. So take this with a grain of salt. But according to the survey, 74% of women under 25 said they wanted to be approached more often. That number held relatively high even for women in their 30s, and it declined slightly for women that were 40 plus. While this obviously isn't a gold standard data set, like I said, it is revealing, and it does suggest that there are large parts of women who do want to be approached, and they actively want to be approached. It's a sign of being seen. And this sort of challenges the common online narrative that, women hate being approached. Instead, it's probably more about how they're approached. And I think that's the gray area. And that same survey showed that younger women were approached more often and still wanted more approaches. Women in their 30s were approached less frequently, but they also expressed a less of a desire for it. And this may reflect the social changes, I guess, in our environments. Less parties, more stable relationships, smaller social circles as people age. But look, it fits kind of the existing demographic research. By their 30s, many people are coupled up, making both approaching and interest in them naturally declining and lower. I think that kind of makes sense. It's kind of normal and what I'd expect. Now, the online discourse sort of paints a different picture though, because women find cold approaches to be creepy or unwelcomed. Yet these smaller little surveys kind of contradict that narrative. So that's sometimes where I think all the women hate men and men hate women on TikTok and IG, I don't think you should read into that too much, because real life is very different. And if we look at evolutionary psychology and dating research, it does show that women expect men to initiate in most cultures. That is literally a standard, and that has not changed across hundreds of years. And there's a great book, I think it's called The Evolution of Desire, and it talks about the whole history of men and women in dating. And it's a great book. I really do recommend you go read it. The mismatch seems to come from men perceiving rejection as hostility, it's hostile. When women simply are just rejecting specific men or specific approaches, but not the concept of approaching itself. I hope you're sticking with me here, because I don't want to get too technical. Now, women generally distinguish between respectful, situationally appropriate, and unwanted advances. And that's where I think we can start to see strides in men being more confident in their approach. Now, going back to the DatePsych survey, it also showed that women cited not attracted alongside fears of harm and inappropriate timing, like the workplace, the gym, and professional risk, as the situations that they would prefer to avoid being approached in, which is fair. I've seen men harass women in the gym before. It's not a nice, pretty sight. I can't say I felt uncomfortable watching it, but it's probably not the environment that I personally approach women. In the gym, I just found like the gym is not the best place. So I can agree, even though I'm not a woman, I can agree that the situation is very important. But what it does suggest is that approaches are wanted, but it's about the right context. The difference between like being seen as creepy or weird and confident may be less about what you actually say as a guy, but more about where and how you do it. And that's where the social expectations come in place, because there are decades of research in psychology and sociology that show that men are still socially expected to initiate the interactions, like I mentioned before. And women initiating doesn't happen very often. It can happen. It's happened to me, but I'm a different kind of guy. Now, socially, if men hesitate, fewer interactions are going to happen, because women aren't rushing to fill that gap. Women aren't going to do it. So if men aren't doing it, it's not going to happen. And this is essentially backed by years and years of studies and data. Again, go read that. I'm going to put the link to the book I'm talking about in the description, because it shows that gendered expectations is actually consistent across loads of different societies and cultures, whether you're in South America, North America, Africa, Asia. It's pretty similar. So we need to ask the scary question. Is it actually more dangerous for men to approach women in today's society? Now, in that same date psych website, and we have to take his data with a grain of salt because I could not verify his sources, but 18% of women overall and 22% of women aged 18 to 25 said they reported someone to an authority for an unwanted advance. And out of these reports, majority of them were made to like HR departments in the workplace. So it wasn't just like a random coffee shop or a gym. And I think that distinction matters because approaching women in the gym is different to harassing a coworker. And these figures aren't from a representative sample, unfortunately, but they reveal that reports do happen, especially in professional settings where the rules and the risk are a lot higher and men need to be aware of that. And even if the majority of men never face consequences, I think the fear of the worst case scenario, such as losing a job, public shaming, that weighs heavy on some men's minds. And this is a risk, right? A rare but extreme consequence. And most men perceive these risks as more threatening than everyday rejection. Now, unfortunately, I searched to hell and high water to find a large gold standard data set to prove that this perception shift exists. I couldn't, personally. If you guys got any data that you can share, I'd love to read it. But it does fit the behavior that I'm seeing in today's world and what I'm seeing online, which I know that's only a small subset of the reality of the real world, but it's important. Now, in the 80s and 90s, I'm pretty sure HR didn't play as much of a role as it does today, right? Organizations have very strict rules and reports are common. And if you think about smartphones, cameras, social media, mistakes are amplified. Reporting data has confirmed that harassment has increased and it could be casual approaches or riskier approaches. Look at someone like Noel Clark, who was accused and found guilty of harassment and some sexual advances. He spoke about it publicly. And he said, yeah, he made inappropriate comments, but it was like banter. It was like a joke. And he even apologized to the girls at the time. And then 10 years later, they've accused him of, sexual harassment and those type of things. The reality is, times change. What was acceptable 10 years ago is not acceptable in today's world. You have to accept that. And just because of that, that doesn't mean that men can't find more respectable ways to approach women. That shouldn't be that difficult. Now, there's one more bit of this data that was quite interesting, and I'm going to link the study in the description. And the guy spoke about something called the regret factor. 60% of the men across all age groups regretted not approaching more women, and the regret was stable across all generations. He labeled it as regret psychology. And essentially, it's when people kind of miss opportunities. And essentially what it is like people regret missed opportunities more than failures in the long run. And it's a pretty solid principle. And even if the dating specific data isn't available, you can kind of guess that most men are probably in that crowd as well. I mean, there's loads of girls I've probably seen and I was like, I'm never going to see her again. I should have shot my shot, right? Now, fear may stop men from acting, but over time, it's the inaction that I think most men regret. So with that being said, in this same data set, because I want to wrap this up real soon, most men who did approach in person reported getting phone numbers, dates, and sometimes getting lucky. And about 13% of these men actually formed long-term relationships from these encounters. These numbers are consistent with general dating success rates. Not everyone works out, but approaches are far more hopeless. So look, here's the truth. Men are approaching less because social opportunities have declined. We go out less. We have smaller social groups than our parents did. And also, men are now becoming way more risk averse. The fear is stronger than the reality, but the fear is there. And the irony is women still want respectful approaches. That's what they want. And the men who do take that risk often succeed. The real question is, if fewer people are meeting in person, what's replacing it? Because if you look at speed dating, about 80% of men never go, right? And if we look at online dating, how many of those actually turn into meetups? The truth is, men are checked out, and there is a reason why. If you watch this video, I break it down. Peace.